Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday. Welcome to the latest episode of the Prime Property Finance Podcast. In this episode, we have none other than the Joshua Keegan, the ultimate FD himself. He is a property investor, a portfolio landlord. He used to own a HMO agency, which he scaled and sold. And now he's running Ultimate FD, which helps business owners and property investors with their finance functions. I'm super excited. There's some absolute gold in this episode for any business people or property investors, whether you're starting out, scaling, or looking to downsize your portfolio. So please tune in, please listen to the end. There's some absolute gold in here. And let's get into the episode. Josh, super excited to have you on board. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. The last time I saw you properly, I think you were doing an underwater swimming contest at the spa, holding your breath. It was very impressive. After you beat me in that, I thought, you know what? I have to do this guy's podcast now. He's been asking me for years. But it's like he showed me up and now I've got to be a guest. Just got to be a part of this guy's thing. So I'm excited to be here and I'm very much looking forward to diving into the topics today.
Thanks, Josh. And it's nice to win something. So if only there was some sort of glass medal or award or, big certificate.
I wouldn't say you'd actually win the underwater. So I think obviously you smashed the underwater contest for the most distance you could do in the pool, but I think what was most impressive was your kickoffs off the wall. They were just I've never seen so much power in a man's legs to get him to launch him.
I'll take that because I've often been called suggestions that I don't have the strongest or the most powerful legs in the world. So I'll take that, and we'll move swiftly on before I get called out.
Send the video of you kicking yourself off a pool wall and people will be disproved. But it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And obviously, we've been working together quite closely over the last very closely over the last 12 months. But more so I've been, mentored by you in various ways over the last 24 months or so. And it's been a real pleasure to get to know you and understand the way you operate your business and your life in general. So it's been great to be part of that journey with you, and obviously you are mine. And so excited to, we've worked together. So I'm really excited to kind of have you on as a guest and go through some of the things that I've learned from you and just in the wider space and around how we both impact property investors in different ways. So do you want to just share a little bit of an intro into yourself and your background?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Joshua Keegan. I'm originally a chartered accountant by trade, and around 3 years ago I set up a new business which is called Ultimate FD, and we basically build 7-figure finance functions for 7-figure entrepreneurs, and we're basically on a mission to empower more entrepreneurs with finance skills, with finance knowledge, because we believe that is the backbone of every single business decision. And when you get that bit right, the whole business is going to work better and fundamentally perform better. So that's what I do now. In terms of the background leading up to that, well, I started as an entrepreneur about 11 or so years ago, and I actually started a HMO specialist letting agency and then scaled that to a point where we actually exited that at the end of 2021 for a really nice multiple of profit, which was great. But along that journey, I was in the business, I was managing HMOs for other people. And I actually started to buy the HMOs or buy the properties myself as well. So, I've been involved I've sourced lots of deals for investors. I've been heavily involved in that front. Myself personally, I don't know, at least 20 or so between flips or bought and sold, or things that I've held now in my portfolio, or things that I held then I sold later in my portfolio. So I've done a lot of different things, done a lot of different property strategies, and been involved in the industry for about 10 or so years.
So would that class you as a veteran?
I've never felt like a veteran. I like simple property stuff. I don't like to, I'm not one of these big investors that loves being involved in a deal for 2 years, whatever. I'm in and out. I like to find a property, get someone else to refurb it for me, get someone else to manage everything from the tenanting to the refinancing, and just hold it as an asset. So I've got a fair chunk of experience, but I wouldn't say veteran. I think there's people out there that are a lot more hands-on than me, that have done a lot more than me. But I think probably what I've used property is probably what most people should do. It's a very much a passive tool for wealth. My focus is primarily businesses. I like scaling nice, lucrative lifestyle businesses, which are high margin, have a good exit value, have a great little team involved. And I like using the money from those businesses to actually buy and acquire assets. And I generally like those assets to be relatively low risk, relatively low return, but they just sit there and cash flow. And I've done, I guess, one of the biggest things for me about property is because I was kind of jumped into it 2 feet first when I was like 24, 25, and just started buying houses and thought, what could possibly go wrong? But I think probably one of the biggest things that happened, which has really made me see the benefit of owning property. And, people always say, the best time to start was yesterday. The second best time to start was today. Was just the power of like the compounding and the power of the market. Because since COVID happened, my portfolio just rocketed because you had yield compression, and everything went up massively in value. So my wealth substantially increased, post-COVID, over the few years of COVID, because all the HMOs I had went from being worth probably a non-commercial valuation at 200 grand, 300 grand. Just had one revalued recently, like 450, 500. And it's just a different ball game. So I think from my end, I see a huge amount of benefit to owning property. I don't love getting involved in the data and the noise of actually buying and operating properties at all. But I've always focused my energies on, building businesses and then buying assets. And I highly recommend everyone does that and at least takes that approach to acquire a portfolio over a period of time.
It's interesting to see that you don't like getting involved in the day-to-day of property and the hassle and stress, yet you still own a HMO management company. So is that why you don't like that? And is also that why you exited that business?
Good questions. So I like work which involves me sitting at a computer and thinking, and maybe more kind of introverted style work, which I can make more efficient and make better and make systems, processes. Like that's kind of work I enjoy doing. Like if you give me a problem and I've got to work out what the process is, what the system is, and then I can then create that and then delegate it, like that's where I'm in my kind of happy place. I think with property, I find a lot of it's driving to and from the site. It's having conversations with people that are difficult to work with 90% of the time, and it's just a lot of disasters that you can't really foresee. So I think it's probably just a lack of control that I don't enjoy about it, because it's quite hard to actually systemize and process it. So I've never been hugely into it. I mean, you can have the best strategy in the world, the best bill in the world, and submit a planning application, and in theory it should be done in a month or 2 months, but you can still be sitting there in a year's time wondering what the hell's going on. So I don't love that side of it. I know people absolutely do. But the HMO letting agency, I mean, yeah, it definitely added to it, because, when you have 400 or so tenants, 12 team members, like dealing with all of that, you do see different sides of it. And now all of my stuff is either on a lease, primarily with supported living providers, or I rent to rent it. So I rent to rent it with somebody that rents it from me, and then they have the front line with the tenants and the utilities and all those different elements. I just don't think it's my natural go-to be honest with you. It's not my thing. Like, I don't like going to a site and seeing a builder and talking about where they're going to plaster the walls, or like
what materials they're going to use. And
my brother loves that. He loves going on site and just seeing where the rubble is being piled, and I get nothing out of it. But I like the back end where it's done and it's beautiful. I like that bit, but the whole lead up to that is not my thing. So generally, I try and outsource or leverage as much of that as I possibly can, and just try to get in on the end result is what I like to do.
So it'd be interesting to know why you got into property in the first place. But I think from just quickly on my side, I've always been self-employed, so I've never had a pension per se, have a pension, but no employer pension. And for me, property was that opportunity to build a pension pot, and so I wanted to be as passive as possible. And quite a few years ago, we got into, we did some training, and the noise around, you need to go for higher cash flow in properties, just HMOs and serviced accommodation. Serviced accommodation, whilst holiday let had been around for a long time, serviced accommodation was there. And that was quite new. And I think when I started, one of my properties was, I think it was the fourth property in Swansea on Airbnb.
Nice.
So it's really like first mover advantage. It wasn't the best property in the world, granted, but it gave me an insight. I thought, oh, this is great. So we did a bit more, but actually the competition levels, every new property that just entered, the standard went up and up and up, and it turned out it was a business. And I just made a load of extra noise and work for myself. And I was on phone calls at 10 o'clock at night. People can't get in and they're locked out, and police and all these other things. I thought, this isn't for me. And so similar to you, just trying to reduce as much noise as possible. So it's interesting to see how you've taken that approach on the HMOs to either offload it to a rent-to-rent company or to supported living, which is something we've done leases with housing associations for the last 5 or 6 years. And that is, for me, passive income, where you can just get a property, hand it over, not have to deal with any end tenants, end users or anything like that, just invoice once a month. And that's about as passive as it can get, as far as I can see. So was that a journey so how did you get into, how did you get into property in the first place? And was that journey a similar journey that you went on through noise into trying to find passive, or was that a plan from the beginning?
Good question. So why did I get into property in the first place? Well, to be honest, probably a bit of luck, or maybe I'd say probably luck's actually a bit harsh. Actually, there wasn't much strategy around it. All I knew was that me and my friend, we'd lived together for years, and we were living together in Manchester City Centre, and we were paying, I don't know what it was. I think it must have been £1,000 a month, whatever, £700 a month each to live in a really nice, swanky flat in Manchester, which was cool. We, we're having a great time. But I think we both just thought that, that whole ethos of, renting is dead money, and how good would it be if we bought a house together? And we thought, well, we could just do that. So rather than paying the rent to, the flat, we could actually buy a house and we could pay off the mortgage instead. And I think we're both in that headspace. I actually got in contact with the guy that then became my business partner through the letting agency, and we haven't spoken for years. And I actually rang him and said, we're thinking about buying a house. Would you come and speak to us about it? Because I knew he was getting into property. And he actually came over and he told us about HMOs. And he told us that he was buying HMOs, but he wasn't buying them in our area. You'd buy them in Salford or Manchester, where like the student areas were. But he'd actually started building and doing HMOs, which are a premium in the kind of outer towns, the satellite towns around Manchester, like Oldham, Rochdale, Bury, Bolton, all those kind of areas. And it was quite a big thing to do at the time. I remember this was like 11, 12 years ago. And there weren't anywhere near as many professional HMOs there now. There weren't many premium ones at all. So we heard that. We thought that's a cool idea. So we thought we'd buy, me and my friend then went and started looking for properties. And we ended up buying a house near where we were, probably about 20 minutes outside the centre of Manchester, which had, 2 reception rooms, 3 bedrooms upstairs, big, nice property. I think we bought it for £120,000, which is bonkers now. Like, you wouldn't be able to touch anything for that. That area is now Article 4. And we basically just renovated all ourselves. So we got our hands dirty. I'd never done that before. We painted the walls. I became really good at filling. I was very good at filling. So rather than getting like a Venetian plaster in to come and sort out it had like the old school like Venetian in the hallways and stuff, because it was like the old style house. I would like fill it in, or I just was very good at filling walls, filling holes in walls. So that was my main job.
Is that on your CV as well?
It should be top filler, yeah, because I wasn't very good at anything else. But no, it was a steep learning curve. And to be honest with you, that's where, if you're asking like why I realised I don't really like properties, I hated that. Those refurb days of just basically moving rubble, or like just cleaning up a room after you'd drilled a load of stuff. I just couldn't stand. I couldn't believe that people actually do that. Where people actually, it's my first experience of labouring, and I couldn't believe that someone comes to a place, you pay him 100 quid for a day, and they just move gravel all day. Like, that blew my mind. I was like, and there's no better way to do it. There's no more efficient way. That they've just got to do that. That blew my mind. But I'm always looking for the more efficient solution, and sometimes it just isn't one. You just got to literally pick up a bag, then pick up a bag, then pick up a bag. I couldn't believe that, and all the materials and the tools and all that was mind blowing. The amount of trips to B&Q and stuff, but we got it done. And that house, we sold that 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We did really well out of it. But me and my friend, we had a room each, and then we rented the other 3 rooms. 2 of them were normally to mates, and one of them was to normally a person off a spare room. And it was just great. Like, we lived there for maybe 4 or 5 years. Friends came and went. Always seemed to have more friends that would come in, and it was just an incredibly happy time. Unfortunately, that was the time where I was actually starting the business as well. So I didn't have like a huge amount of income. So it worked really well that my living costs were basically free. And it just meant that I could focus on the businesses while I was getting them up and running. And then we started to buy more houses on top of that. And we just kept buying and steadily just building that portfolio from that point onwards. So that's how I got into it, really. Kind of a bit of a happy accident, happy mistake, but it worked out. It works pretty well.
And is he still a business partner today?
No, he's not actually. I ended up, me, him and my brother ended up buying 2 houses together, and we actually sold both of them, and we did so well out of both of them because I think we bought them relatively cheap. We did a lot of all the work ourselves. So we ended up making, 80 to 100 grand off both of them after 2 or 3 years. And obviously we had the cash for the meantime. He's my best friend. So, he's still very much heavily involved in my life. But the guy who came to talk to us about the properties and the HMOs, he's the one we kind of founded the management business together. And yeah, he was the one I went on that journey together with. He unfortunately passed away maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. But he was quite ill from a couple of years into that business. So he wasn't heavily involved after a couple of years, but the business did really well regardless. And yeah, I think if he was still here, we probably would be business partners today, but unfortunately he's not.
Yeah, I'm aware of that story, and it was a difficult time. I'm sure having a business partner pass away, especially quite early on in the journey. But I think, you've mentioned that you've learned a lot from that, being kind of thrown in the deep end and just having to make it work and having to get on with the business and kind of support the people around you that needed supporting us at the same time.
Well, I was very lucky because I look back now, and you get so many people that want to make a change in their life, but they're almost too comfortable, or they've got too much going on. They've got a job already. They've got a wife. They've got a couple of kids, and to make the change and to develop themselves to do what they want to do is really, really difficult. And it's almost like the carrot versus the stick, where they're chasing the carrot, but the stick is actually they're being motivated. And the people that actually make the change are the ones who have the stick, where they get made redundant or they get fired or something happens. They need that stick to then chase the carrot. Whereas although I would never wish upon what happened, or, obviously if I could go back in time and stop, Phil getting cancer and, having a real difficult battle and eventually passing away, and stop all that hurt and pain that came with all of that, it probably was an incredible gift for me in many ways, because I had to just do it. So I was 24 or maybe 25. I had basically no business experience. I was learning as I go, and I'd just done 2.5 years being an accountant. That's my corporate career today. He started to invest in me, and I remember that weekend where he got sick, or we knew he had been sick for a long period of time, but I remember the weekend where his wife called and just said, can you come over? He's overwhelmed, too much going on. And he gave me this huge list of all these things that were going on in his head, all these challenges, all these things that were happening. And he was very much like a dynamo on the wealth dynamics, like a very creative person. But he was very much like a wheeler dealer. Like, he would just get stuff done, and he would just find creative ways to do everything. But obviously trying to inherit that is just creative ways to him were just an absolute mess to me. And I came in and I was, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. All sorts of crazy things. Like, I remember one of the things he told me was we're doing a deal for an investor, and the property, they hadn't had the valuation yet for the mortgage, but they need to get started on the refurb because there's only a certain amount of time until the interest rate will run out, for example, or the they needed to get started because they needed to get the finance in, but they couldn't wait for the valuers to come for like a month or whatever, so they wanted to get started. So he'd actually started on the refurb, and then he told me that one of the things I had to do was make sure the kitchen was put back in for Tuesday, because they'd taken the kitchen out, put it in the garden. So the kitchen needs to be put back in and staged as if there was a kitchen there for Tuesday. So when the valuer came around, they would value it because it had a kitchen in the property. And there's all those kind of things. It sounds kind of funny, but when you're like 24, 25, you have no idea. You've never been for any of this stuff before. You're like, what are you talking about? I've got to get the
What's going on?
Yeah, it's bonkers. There's all those kind of things. But I remember that weekend. It was the 4-day bank holiday weekend. And I remember thinking, like, this is a fork in the road. I've got a choice here. I either bail and go, you know what, thanks very much, but this is going to be too much, or I dig in and just see what happens. And I, of course, chose to dig in and see what happens, but I had to do a lot of things. Like, he was out and he was driving the business, so I had to learn how to be a leader, how to be a manager, and how to step up into that position, how to, work with investors, how to find deals, how to recruit people. I had to learn how to do that very, very quickly. But then I also had to recruit, and I had to bring in 2 or 3 people into the business almost straight away, because I no longer had capacity to do the roles I was doing. So I had to recruit, I had to learn how to scale, I had to learn how to systemize, I had to learn how to just do a lot of different things very, very quickly. And I don't think I would sign up to that now. Like, if you said, Josh, I'm going to throw you into the pain of basically having no skill sets, but having to learn so fast to make sure this thing stays afloat to achieve what you want to achieve, I don't think I wouldn't be on board.
No, and I think, that's great with hindsight, isn't it? And sometimes you don't know what you're getting yourself into as well. But that is a proper sink or swim moment, isn't it? But it's also a career defining moment, because all of those skills that you've learned are absolutely crucial business skills, which have now paid dividends in learning those 10 years on. And you're building, scaling more businesses, effectively using all of the skills that you learned and have refined over that time frame. So, like you said, I'm pretty sure you'd be pleased with that decision that you made.
100%. But I think the point is, I had nothing to lose. I had no kids. I was living in a HMO that I'd bought with no rent to pay. And I was 24, 25, probably naive in terms of the amount of work or energy and the impacts this would have on me for the rest of my life. So I was very lucky. And I think the question is like, how do we get people who are 35 with 2 children, 45 with 2 children, to make that change? And I don't know how you do it, but you've got to create an environment or create people around you that are doing those kind of things, are making those changes, that for them change is normal, or doing stuff like this is absolutely normal. And I think that's what most people are lacking. And if anyone was listening to this thinking, I would love to scale a business or buy more houses or quit my job and do X, Y, Z, it's probably finding people or a group of people where that change is a totally normal thing to happen, and like leaning into that group as you do it.
And I think there's a saying, isn't it? I think it's something like comfort is the killer of ambition.
Yeah.
So when you put that next to get out of your comfort zone, because that's where the magic happens. And I think it's been, and people talk about the leap of faith. It's the leap of faith of getting out of the comfort zone into outside of your comfort zone is where you really learn about yourself, how far you can push yourself, how far you can learn, what you're made of, what resilience you've got. And then, like you said, surrounding yourself with people who've taken those leaps of faith to actually say, yeah, you can do this, believe in yourself, and we'll help support you along that path is so powerful. And I think that's probably where people, it's identifying, people who are in that comfort zone, and these are probably the people who are listening to this who are going, oh, that might be me. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because you've got a good job, you've got a good salary, you've got a good style, but you're going to be stuck at that level. And some people are happy to be there, but if you don't want to be there, if you don't make that leap or that change, that's going to be your path forever. And that's the challenging part, isn't it? It's identifying when you are too comfortable.
Yeah, 100%.
So we've talked a bit about your background and your investing experience and things. So you touched earlier on about what you're doing now from a business perspective with UFD. Do you want to talk a bit more about the kind of clients that you work with? And
yeah, of course. So we typically work with seven-figure businesses, and with entrepreneurs that have scaled to at least £1 million worth of revenue. And what we do is we fill a big gap, which seems to happen at that level, whereby the business has scaled quickly. The entrepreneur's been focused on sales, marketing, ops, or whatever it may be. But then they realize that the finance function is just a bit all over the place. It's then been invested in, and it just needs a total level up. So what you find for founders when they get to that seven-figure level and a bit beyond is they need to sort their finances out. And when you are at £1 million worth of revenue plus, you get to a place where actually you can make more money by stopping the growth, which has been the thing that you've been focusing on for years and years and years, and actually understanding the mechanics of how your business actually works. And you can find profit just by doing that activity and that exercise. So we speak to those people, and we come in and we build finance functions for them, whether that's the systems, the team, the reporting packs, the forecasting, the modeling, the ongoing FD support. And we found a real sweet spot there. And it's quite incredible the amount of people that have never had a formal finance function. It still blows my mind, actually, to have got to where they've got to and never had it in place. It's staggering. And I think it gets to a place where people just can't afford not to have it anymore, particularly when you get to that larger level. It's just, it's a necessity, and it's a painful thing for the entrepreneur to set up. So we tend to set it up for them.
Yeah, it's crazy. I speak to a lot of business owners through, the day-to-day, property investors, people who have got, multiple businesses, or they've got a job, but they also run in a property portfolio or a couple of different businesses around property. And, one of the biggest challenges that people is they don't have enough time to do, one, live the lifestyle that they want to live, or do the things they want to do, or grow further and things. And one of the biggest challenges is around time. And then you have a conversation around what you're doing, and they're spending a lot of their time on admin functions and finance, bookkeeping. They're doing all of the bookkeeping, they're doing all of the finance work themselves, they're doing all the pay runs themselves and things like that. And it's when you start having those conversations around why there's a control thing that they don't want to give away control, but also there's just a lack of education. They don't understand that there are other people that can do this for them at a fraction of the cost of what they are valued at. If you look at their time and income compared to where they've taken their business to. And I know you spend a lot of time trying to educate people about those different functions. So do you want to just share a little bit about how people can get out of that trap?
Yeah, of course. So what's interesting is you're talking about time, but I would actually say time comes from finances, because one of the key things you've got to do, one of the key things you've got to look at is, do you have a business or do you have a job? And most entrepreneurs, they want a business, yet they work in their business. And they're normally the worst paid person who's working the most hours under the sun to actually sustain their business. But they can tell you, oh yeah, we make 15 grand profit a month, and we make 10 grand or 20 grand profit a month, whatever it may be at the level they're operating at. But it's like, are you making that 20 grand pre you getting paid or after you getting paid? And if you were to pay yourself the full market rate for what you are doing, to be a managing director of this business, to work 12 hours a day, whatever it is that you are actually doing, would your business actually still make money? And 9 times out of 10, it would, but the margins would actually be really low. And it wouldn't be a business that you'd invest in. It wouldn't be a business that you'd want to own. And you'd go, actually, that's not actually, they're very good at all. So one of the conversations we have with a lot of entrepreneurs is like, well, how do I get my time back? Or I'm working too much in this business. How do I actually, get myself out? And you can go down into the nitty gritty. Like, I could tell you the process for actually making sure you never have to make a payment again. Like, I don't make payments to my business. I haven't done for years and years and years. Like, no one should be logging into online banking. No one should be paying invoices. It's an absolute waste of your time. And it's easier now than ever before to set up a system and framework to do that. So there's little things you could kind of go through to tell you, right, this is the process for this, this is the process for that. But those are like symptoms. The underlying disease is just having a business model. And so what I mean by business model is, what is the architecture of this business? How does it actually work in practice? And there's 5 rules to a business model. You've got your minimum price. So what's the lowest price you're willing to charge? Your minimum gross margin. What's the lowest gross margin you're willing to charge? So for example, it could be 50%, which means that you are going to hit, for every pound of revenue, you're going to hit 50p worth of gross profit. Then your maximum overhead budget. So the maximum amount you're willing to spend on overheads. Then your minimum net margin, which is basically what goes through to the bottom. and then your maximum size. And I'd say there's two really key variables in there that most entrepreneurs get totally wrong. And that is the maximum overheads and the maximum size that you're willing to operate at. The maximum overheads they get wrong is because they don't put their time into overheads. So build a business model which incorporates your salary. So if you're an MD for a business and you know that you work too much, you're a really good MD, and if you were to pay yourself market rate, you might take 100 grand a year. So you want to make sure in your business model, you've got your salary of 100 grand a year. Well, let's say 120 grand, so it's easier. So every single month, you've got £10,000 in your overheads to actually pay you. So you then need to grow the business to make sure you're still hitting a 30-40% net margin, but you've got to grow to that point that you can sustain yourself as well. That 30-40% net margin needs to be after you've been paid the market rate to do your work. And that's really important. If you were to sell or if you were to replace yourself, your business is a business. It's not a job. It is viable. Someone else can step in and actually do that role for you if you wanted to do that. The second is then size. So as part of this, you've got to determine how big you're actually going to get. And most entrepreneurs make the mistake of always growing. In reality, growth means that you are actually reducing your margin, because as you grow, profit comes down. So you want to choose a size, a sweet spot, whereby your business fundamentally works. And that could be £1 million a year with 30% margin. It could be £5 million a year with 20% margin, whatever it may be. You've actually got to work out where your business works. And what I mean by works is you have three things in balance: profit, service, and leverage. So we can go into that in more detail if you want to. But the key sentiment would be is, in terms of those people that are too busy, that don't have enough time to invest in property and do these kind of things with the money they're making, it's because they've not built a business, they've built a job for themselves, they're not clear on their business model, and they've not got to a business model which actually sustains them at their market rate, and they're not clear on the size that they need to get to and stay at to actually make sure the business is worth their while owning for a long period of time.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of gold in there, and thank you for that explanation. Really precise and succinct. So thank you. I think we could kind of really go deeper and deeper on this, but I don't think that's probably for now. I'm sure you'll share later on your details on how people can learn more about the various services and skills that you share on a daily basis. In terms of, I think, just to move on a little bit from that, on touch around property investors. What are the kind of things, the mistakes that you see investors making from a financial aspect? I'm sure you've seen behind the scenes of many property portfolios and things like that. You know, we see things from our side, from a mortgage perspective and a mortgage and finance perspective. But from your side of things, because obviously property finance, it can be two very similar terms, but they can mean very different things. You're in finance, I'm in finance, but we're in different subcategories of that. So from an accounting and reporting finance side of things, what are the sort of common mistakes or themes, maybe more than mistakes, that you see in portfolios?
Yeah, good question. So I've seen behind the scenes hundreds of different property portfolios now. Like my zero account access is bonkers. I've been trying to audit it and get it down because I've just spent so much time speaking to so many different investors, so many different owners, so many different entrepreneurs, and seeing behind the scenes of kind of how they operate and what their portfolios actually look like. And I'd say it's actually quite rare you meet a property investor or entrepreneur who's scaled a portfolio that's actually got a good amount of profit in it. And once again, it's going back to the point as before. That is profit after they've taken out their time, or they factor in the cost of an agent or someone to actually manage this business for them. It's quite rare. It's actually really rare you see someone that's got a really great portfolio because of a few different reasons. Either they've scaled their portfolio too quickly with a lot of debt. So although they may have 10 grand a month, they've got 7 grand a month of capital repayments and interest or whatever it may be. Either they've built a portfolio, then they've started to do developments or something, and then all of a sudden they're in a really difficult place with bridging finance or whatever it may be, and it all comes crumbling down. Or probably more to the point is they've just bought deals that aren't actually very good, and they've just got overly excited. They've gone, I want to buy 5 properties this year, and they've just bought 5 crap deals. And they're not actually making too much money, or maybe they make money for the first 1 or 2 years, but 3 or 4 years down the line, when maintenance creeps up and they've got a few more voids, agents put up their fees and become VAT registered, it all kind of starts to crumble and fall apart. So I think the biggest lesson, or the most important thing, which I would suggest that everyone needs to do, is they need to know their numbers, and review their portfolio annually as an absolute minimum. So when I say know your numbers, I would say that every single portfolio owner needs to be looking at least a profit and loss every single month, every single property. So every single month, how did the property perform? And the more advanced level of this would be budget to actuals. So what I have every month, every single one of my properties, so not on a high level, at an individual property level, I could show you that, right, this HMO, it made me £1,500 profit last month. Great. That's data. The information that I'm getting from that is it made £1,500 profit, but it was actually meant to make £1,800 worth of profit because that's what I set as the budget. And then I go, well, why? Because there was a void, or because we had to replace a boiler, or because there was a leak in the ceiling, so there was an emergency call out to do some plumbing and a plaster replacement, or whatever it may be. So I've got information there about how the property's actually performing, what's actually going on. So having that monthly information is really important. And if you've set a budget for the year and you're consistently below budget, you need to look at that and go, well, why is this property consistently below budget? What can I do about it? What can I change? Because the aim of the game is to beat the budget. You want to beat that budget every single year and challenge yourself to do that. And every month, by looking at that, just the active process of looking at these accounts and seeing them visibly will have a huge impact on the performance of each of those properties under your portfolio. So that's step one. Any questions on that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I guess the question would be then, once you have reviewed every one of your properties in your portfolio on a monthly basis, on a singular P&L, profit and loss, and the budget versus actuals, have you then made any strategic decisions off the back of that? For instance, if you think, oh, well, actually, this property's been in your head before you started this process, or this is a really good, this is one of my favorite, best performing properties. And then after a while, when you sit down and look at these, go, actually, this isn't performing very well at all. It's much different to my plan. Because I think, and having seen investors and spoken to them, they just kind of keep properties for long term because of the reasons you said earlier around property values increase over time, the stress and hassle of actually going through the process of buying a property, refurbing it, finding tenants and refinancing it. That is a stressful or can be stressful, but it is a drawn out process. And so people, what I think, and this is the question really, is people go, well, all right, it's not performing great in their minds. Maybe this is before they do this granularity of review. But they think, well, I'll just keep it anyway because it'll go up in value over time and I can deal with that. So I guess there's a few roundabout questions in there. Have you made any of those strategic decisions to then go, well, actually, I thought this was performing well, it's not, and now I'm going to offload that property? And have you used that strategically? And I guess, have you also seen people with that mindset of going, they think it's performed well, but actually they don't know?
Yes, there's a few points. I think the monthly, I'd say, budget to actuals, and in reality, just by definition, so when you set a budget, it should kind of be the worst case. So in general, your portfolio should be, you should have put in there 7% a month for maintenance. Assume your tenant fine fees from your agent is going to be one per room every 12 months or something. In reality, you should be better than all those things. Have an extra £150 a month for boiler repairs or whatever it may be. So if you're set a budget properly and you're looking at every month and you're actually not beating the budget, then that is a bit of a red flag. That's like this isn't looking very good actually. But then the annual exercise is to then do what we call a portfolio review. And what this consists of is actually getting all the information from your portfolio. So you'd have a sheet which basically has far left column would be the address of the property. And then you would have maybe the perceived value of the property. And I always ask a broker who I know could sell it for me, what they would value the property at this point. Then I have the mortgage value. Then I've got my equity. Then I have my ownership percentage, which might be 50% if it's a JV, or 100% for me. So now I can see what my actual equity in that property is. Then I get the information for the last 12 months and say, all right, did my return for the last 12 months of my profit was, say, £12,000, whatever it may be for the last 12 months. Make it nice and simple. So now I can see, right, I've got £12,000, and say if this property has gone up significantly in value, my equity may have increased. And the number I want to get to is ROE, which is I call return on equity. It might be the same as Rocky, return on capital employed. But I guess all I'm looking at is how much money do I have in that property now if I were to sell it? And let's say it's £100,000 for simple numbers. And how much profit am I making per annum on that property based on the last 12 months of actuals profit that I've had? And so, in that example, £12,000 on £100,000 would be 12%. But in reality, over time, what tends to happen is probably two things. One is the equity goes up, which is really good. But if the equity goes up too substantially and your profit doesn't increase the same, or the profit actually comes down, you can find that 12% can easily come down. Right, 2 years later, it's gone up by 200k. So the area's done really well, but actually, I've been hit with whatever. Like rents have come down, occupancy's been really high, maintenance has gone up. So that it's gone up to 200k, but my profit's gone down to 6k, or even stayed at 12k, and actually 12k on 200 grand is 6%. So you kind of come down pretty dramatically in terms of return on equity. And why is that number important? Well, it just shows the opportunity cost of that property. So basically, if I was to, I think, given that property holds a fair chunk of risk, and given that in reality, in 10, 15 years time, I'm probably going to have to put a new kitchen in, probably going to have to change a roof, whatever. Do I think it is a good idea to get a 6% return, or should I sell that property, take the money out, and then put it into the stock market and get 7, 8, 9%, S&P 500, 10% over the last, I think, 5 years? And you've got to start making decisions like that based on the opportunity cost of actually keeping the money in versus taking it out. And that's a really important exercise to do every single year. And I said there's probably 4 decisions you need to make when you're looking at each property. And by the way, before I tell you what those 4 decisions are, this is really important, because I've actually had 3 people approach us in the last 2 weeks who've got sizable portfolios, 25 to 30 properties, who are all in a boat where they've just kept them too long. And now their Section 24 kicked into play, so they're paying way too much tax. The returns have come down, and they're like, what do I do? And they need help now. And they've admitted they've mismanaged these properties, they've not spent the time on it, they're not getting the returns, and now they need to work something out, and now they want us to model the outcomes for them. So you want to do this every year. Don't think that, I've got 25 properties, I don't want to sell 5 of them because actually I'm in because I've got 25 properties. It's like, no, if you got 25 and you sold 15, but you could pay off all the mortgage on the 10, that might be better than the other way around. So the decisions you got to make each year is keep, sell, refinance, or repurpose. So keep, sell, refinance, or repurpose. So I think hopefully they're pretty obvious. Like keep, does what it says in the tin. You might just keep it and go, no, this is a great performing asset. Maybe the return on equity on it is 7% plus, and you go, yeah, that's great for me. I'm fine with that. I like this property. It's good property. I'm just going to keep it and leave as is. Clearly you want to make sure you've got some maintenance budgets, that you're putting up the rents where you can, and you're just managing it well. So what I don't mean is keep and do nothing. I mean keep and just ensure you're managing it well, reviewing the numbers and keeping an eye on it. Second option is sell. So you might look at it and go, you know what? I was looking at a portfolio this week where some of the properties were like at 0.5 or 1.25% return on equity. And it's not necessarily they've done a bad job. It's just the properties have rocketed in value, and the rents haven't gone up anywhere near as well. So I said, like, you better off selling this and paying down some of your mortgages, or putting it into the S&P 500, or just buying another property, just do something else, because you're not getting a good return on this money at all. So that's the second option, to sell. Third option, refinance. So obviously with a sale, there's a lot of benefits because you get rid, but in some cases, actually, to increase your return on equity, you can refinance. So you go and speak to someone like yourself, you say, what could I pull out of this? You say, right, well, you could pull out X, Y, Z, these were the rates now. And all of a sudden you've taken your equity down from 200 grand down to 100 because you pulled £100,000 out. And then you've used that to do something else, or buy another asset or whatever. So your return on equity's gone up. Cash will come down a little bit because you're going to have more interest, but that could be a good decision. There's obviously no tax on a refinance, which is very appealing. And the final one is repurpose. And you might find use some of these things in tandem, but the repurpose for me was, right, this is a professional HMO. If I flip this onto supported living, one of my properties was on 8-bed. It's about 8-bed HMO, 4 en suites, and it was on professional HMO, probably making me about £1,200 to £1,500 a month. And I flipped over to supported living. It's now making around £2,300 a month. And it's a 5-year lease, no maintenance. Like it's just a no-brainer. So you might find that you can actually repurpose some of these things and massively increase the cash flow, increasing your return on equity. Or you might find, actually, I've worked with some people where keeping this property as a HMO is not actually as good as a single let. It looks good on paper, but then you have in the maintenance, the utilities, the management, and you convert it to a single let, and actually it does much better as a result. So those are the 4 things. And I'd say you want to do that every year. You want to be proactive, not reactive, and start making decisions now about what you're going to do over the next 12 months for the year ahead, rather than waiting for it to become an emergency where you're like, wow, this cost me a fortune. I can't actually afford to keep this property. And you have like a knee-jerk style reaction.
Yeah, and the thing with this is, I'm sure you see it. We don't think people do these types of reviews at all, or if they do, it's unsystemized. There's no process to it. It's quite conversational. It's not done based on detail and facts and figures rather than feeling, which is obviously a huge thing. And I think the piece you talked about there, which I think is super important, is the opportunity cost. I think the opportunity cost, and people don't look at those individual returns. They look at cash flow and equity, but don't actually look at the actual return that they're getting on that cash and what could they be doing. And we talk a lot about momentum investing and trying to recycle your cash as much as possible to grow. If you're looking to grow a portfolio, and how you need to try and release as much of that equity out, which is what you talk about refinancing, to use that tax-free lump sum to keep buying and building a portfolio, reduce your cash flow, but it serves that purpose if you're trying to grow your portfolio. So yes, how can you squeeze as much out of everything that you're doing, isn't it? Every penny that you own in terms of your net assets, how do you squeeze as much out of that?
Yeah, and when do you also know when it's time to pull the plug and just get rid of some of your assets as well? I think you have a wealth building phase and like a wealth preservation phase, and you got to work out where you're at. I think wealth building is all around squeezing as much out as you possibly can. Wealth preservation is just getting more strategic and just stop being so attached by the number of houses you have and the egotistical side of it. Start thinking strategically. To give you an example, I've got a few people that we're speaking to at the moment, like some of the people that have approached me, and their problems are quite similar. And I think there's a few issues. One is Section 24 has kicked in. And it's taking a long time for people to realize this is coming. There's a big lag in terms of tax returns. But, if you were making 100K profit and now say you had 50K worth of mortgages, you're now making 150K profit and you now have to pay 40% on that extra 50K, which is a huge amount of extra tax bills. So that's happening, which is making people think, I needed to review this. So make sure you incorporate tax into this as well, because it's all very well, what's your profit? What's your actual cash position? And then what we're also speaking to people about is some people are like old school landlords. And, I say, well, how did that property perform last year? And they say, oh yeah, it did this. And I was like, you've just got the rent and the mortgage in there. And they were like, oh yeah, I do a lot of the management and the maintenance myself. So it's pretty small. I was like, what's the new gas certs? Oh no, I can't do them. So I do pay for them. So it's like, I'm looking at numbers which aren't actually accurate. And some of these people, when they're old school, they tend to be in their 50s and the 60s. And they're starting to speak about legacy planning. So I'm like, it's all very well looking at these properties now where in your head it makes £400 a month profit for a single let. That does look great. But if you hand this to your kids, are they going to be doing the maintenance themselves, or are they going to be managing it themselves? Oh no, they wouldn't dream of doing that. It's like, well, so great, that's fine. So we need to look at these numbers as if they're set up for what they're going to be. And then you start looking at the inheritance side as well and what they're going to take on. And if their kids take them on in their personal names and they've got Section 24 to pay, a lot of these kids aren't, they've already got 50, 60 grand jobs. So they're already at 40%, whereas the landlords at the moment are having the Section 24 at 20%. So they're going to pass down these properties to their kids. Sounds great, but now these kids have got 30 properties that they have no interest in. They've got to do maintenance themselves because they want to keep them. They've got to manage them themselves, and they're going to be hit with 40% tax on a overly inflated taxable profit on cash they don't even have because they had to pay
revenue and not on cash. Yeah, not on profit.
So you kind of go, right, well, get more strategic. And the similar sentiment I've been given to a few people has been, I think we're better off here taking these 20 properties. What are the worst performing ones? Get rid of them, just pay off the mortgage on the other 10, then hand those down to your kids into a trust or whatever it may be. And we're laughing and you're in such a better place. So it's like a lot of the conversation is about consolidating and getting rid as opposed to getting more, which is very interesting because actually I think you can do a lot more with a lot less now when you start getting way more strategic when you built your portfolio.
And I think that's at a certain level, and I think it's important to be clear that that's once you get to a certain level that you're able to downsize. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
A different headache for people that that are growing. But like you said earlier, and this goes for business and for property, there's growth over understanding what that growth looks like and having a clear plan and a forecast and a business model and a business plan around what it is exactly you're trying to achieve, how much you want to make. One of the things that we talk about, and we see this all the time, is people ask us, is this a good deal? They present us a deal, right? I want to buy this property. These are the numbers. This is the purchase price. This is the refurb that it's going to cost. And this is the end value. Is this a good deal? And every time my answer is, it depends, because tell me what your criteria is for a good deal. And people are saying, oh, I don't have one. Because what might be a good deal for Josh, who's sitting on loads of cash from his multiple business exits and doesn't need to recycle his money, compared to myself, who I don't have any of my own cash. I'm using investor finance to fund the deals with and things, so I need to repay those to pay them back. Those two different deals, those two different strategies and criteria will mean it's maybe a good deal for Josh, but not a good deal for Gareth. And so it's getting people to understand what it is they're trying to achieve, but where they're coming from, what time input they're putting in, are they doing the deal themselves, how much time do they have, what skill set do they have. And so criteria and a plan are super important when you start looking to build a portfolio.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. But like you said, yes, we're talking about people with 30 properties here. Having said that, think about building this with the end in mind. Like, rather than buy 5 properties and then realize you bought 2 crap ones, just take your time, buy 3. And then you could consider paying off a mortgage or doing something like in the early phases. I think the biggest thing with property is that having more properties, I don't think is necessarily a good thing. Having a smaller portfolio, which is higher yielding, and taking your time is I think, hands down the best approach.
Amazing. Thanks, Josh. That was really detailed, and I think a lot of people will take a lot of value from that, because I know we have some newer listeners who are looking to build a portfolio, but also some experienced property professionals as well. So that was really valuable. Thank you. What do you see, in terms of the market at the moment? What are you seeing in the UK property market? Are you seeing any specific trends? Are you seeing, what do you see the state on the market from your side?
I'd say from like a lettings market perspective, it seems to be relatively strong, relatively buoyant. I think supported living's been a big one for me over the last kind of couple of years, just trying to get my portfolio set up on that. And I think now that's kind of already started to calm down a bit with councils. I think the purchasings I think the councils are overwhelmed with it, to be totally honest with you, and some of the providers are totally overwhelmed with it. So I wonder if we've already kind of missed that boat. So I think that started to calm down. And I think from like a agency perspective, it's getting more and more expensive to actually have your property managed by like a hands-on letting agency. I think the professional HMO market is definitely here to stay for a good period of time. Having said that, I think HMOs as a model are quite difficult to actually make work now, and they're really, really hard to find. But if I was had my time again and I was going to go out and buy, I'd basically be all over. I would be pushing supported living, emergency accommodation, anything like that, because it just seems that although right now the council's a bit overwhelmed, the demand is just insatiable, and I don't think it's going to stop. So I think the market seems okay. I don't think it's the best time, but I think it's a better time than it will be in a year, 2 years, because it always feels like we're always in these zones, and the best time always was to buy yesterday. So I'm not too bothered about the market personally. I think you just got to rock up, find something that works, and just crack on and just get some deals under your belt, because the only thing you'll regret is not doing that and not taking action.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like you said, we've been doing supported living for a few years now, and I know a lot of other people. We're getting a lot of clients coming to us with these things. We're seeing, obviously, there's in the news massively at the moment. Asylum seekers. There's the wars, in Ukraine and various other places, which has meant that we've taken in the UK. We've taken on people. Obviously, the stuff going on in the Channel on a daily basis is wild, and we're taking those people in and we're housing them ultimately. And so we're already in a sort of housing crisis and a cost of living crisis, as described by the government. The government's tried to say they come in and they're going to develop all these new houses, yet any property investor or developer that you speak to that is trying to develop will tell you the challenges they're getting from a planning perspective, trying to get anything through. It's just super difficult. So the government shouting, yeah, we're going to, increase all of these houses. The cost of development doesn't make sense for people to develop. And so the supply isn't keeping up with the demand. So I think there's definitely, from a rental perspective, there's demand out there. With the agents and things that we speak to, and the investors, whenever they put things on the market, they're going, there's always demand for rentals. And like I said, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So, like you said, now is the time to buy if you haven't already. But like you said, take your time and invest the time in learning about the area that you're going to invest in, the type of strategy that you're going to do to make sure that you are getting into a market that is going to be sustainable as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that your numbers stack.
And that your numbers stack 100%. 100%.
Awesome. Well, look, I'm very conscious of your time. Thanks very much for coming on. There's been some really valuable information there, and I'm sure people will be reaching out to ask you more about some of the things you've discussed. Do you want to share some top tips that you've got from an experience perspective of either your own things that you've learned along the way and from a finance perspective or from dealing with clients?
Yeah, 100%. So I think the number one would just be know your numbers. This is an investment activity. We get very emotionally caught up in these houses and these rooms and the design, the decor. And we spent years buying this property and we want to keep it forever. But honestly, the more you get more logical and more clinical about the returns that you're making on your portfolio, the better you'll be as an investor. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you've bought 2 houses and you realize actually the best thing to do is for me to sell these houses because they're not actually performing, that's great. Just do that and crack on and just take your time and get another one under your belt. That'd be number one, know your numbers. And as I shared, the top tip for that is monthly management accounts, annual performance portfolio review. The second is just make sure you hand down an asset, not a liability. And this is kind of what I'm seeing, and it's quite prevalent actually more recently, where I've had a number of people approach us who've realised that actually they're handing down a portfolio in their personal name to their kids. The kids don't want the portfolio. The portfolio doesn't actually return if they're not involved. And Section 24 is in place, which means the kid's going to pay 40% tax on the revenue, not on the profit. And it's not actually attractive. So we have I'm going to have this legacy of these houses down to my kids. It's like right now, unless you restructure and get clever, you're not handing down an asset, you're handing down a liability that no one actually really wants. So that's the second point, is start thinking about that and start planning for that now. And then the final point is just something I said earlier: keep, sell, repurpose, refinance. Keep, sell, repurpose, refinance. What do you do each year? And every property you need to decide, are you going to keep it and manage it well, sell it, get rid of it, pay the CGT, and exit, which I've never regretted selling a property. I was thought, I don't want to lose this one. I've never thought twice when it's been gone. Are you going to refinance it, so pull some money out to increase your return on equity and speak to someone like Gareth to help you do that? Or are you going to repurpose it and move it to a different model? And you might, combine refinance and repurpose. That's absolutely cool. But are you going to move to support living, single let? What model can you put in place to actually increase the returns for you moving forward? That's it, my 3 top tips.
Amazing. And I think, those are super, super valuable. I think, I've even picked up a couple of tips there that I'm going to go away and review and reflect on. So thanks, Josh, for your time. Really appreciate it. If obviously people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to follow you or get in touch? Or
we can find me on any of my social channels. So Facebook, Josh, you are Keegan. On Instagram, it's the_ultimate_FD. And on LinkedIn, it's Joshua Keegan again. Or if you do want to get yourself a free copy of my book, if you go to ultimatefd.co.uk, there'll be a little book button there you can press. You can actually download a free PDF. And it very much builds on some of the themes and topics today. And it's very relevant for those of you in the property world. So go and get one of those if you'd like to.
Yeah, and I can highly recommend. I have read the book. It's a fantastic read, and it really clearly points out the key, if you have got a business or a portfolio, points out the key people that you need and the numbers that you need to be reviewing. We do, within our business, we review the budgeted actuals on a monthly basis. And it's been a game changer for us to be able to look at those numbers, and make some positive actions or recollections on things, on how we're treating the business. So highly recommend it. We've been working with UFD since we took over the business, and it's been absolutely pleasure working with them. So Josh, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Nice. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.